On June 10th of last year, at 1:04 p.m., I missed a call. I shortly noticed that I had a message, and when I saw who it was from, my stomach sank and my heart began to race. It was from Matt Lavka, the senior warden of St. Mary's in Tuxedo. I gathered my strength and composure and returned the call. Matt picked up, and after a courteous greeting, he informed me that the vestry had unanimously elected me as 12th rector of St. Mary's. He then asked if I would accept. Yes. Thus began a transition process that has been bittersweet and beautiful. I said goodbye to people whose priest I had been, and hello to people whose priest I would soon become. On our first night in the rectory, we arrived frazzled and stressed after the long drive, only to find a poster welcoming our cats, and us, to St. Mary's. It was the first of many touching acts of kindness and hospitality that have defined this transition. The first weeks and months were spent mostly in just figuring out mundane things, such as where the light switches are located and where to get groceries. We met new friends and were welcomed with grace and open hearts. Soon the time came for my official institution as rector, and with 2 bishops, a canon, numerous priests, deacons, friends, family, and community members gathered, we did it with sincerity and style. I will never forget kneeling before the altar and saying the rector's prayer, and seeing the smiles on everyone's faces as we processed out singing Hail, Holy Queen. The luncheon afterward at the Tuxedo Club is something I will never forget, and something for which I will always be grateful. Last March, Pete and I planned to come up here together, ostensibly to see where he was working in Sloatsburg, but really to snoop around Tuxedo. We drove up and down Route 17 and daringly drove up to the gates, which were open, so we figured it was okay to drive through. As we pulled ahead, a stern voice on the speaker barked, "Where are you going?" "To the church," we replied. "Okay, go ahead." Felt like we had gotten away with something. We drove into the church parking lot and then up Fox Hill Road and back out. We really only made the loop right at the beginning of the park. What a surprise when we returned a few months later. My first tour of the park was given by Sue Haywood, and I was astounded by the beauty of the lakes and the architecture. It was all very Brigadoonish, and I was not sure what to make of it in the beginning. But since moving here, however, I have had the opportunity to get to know the town as well as the surrounding areas, such as Harriman State Park and the idyllic St. John's in Arden. Even though remote, the area is much bigger and more diverse than I had imagined. Overall, I think the transition has been as smooth for everyone as it could be. We are enjoying settling into the rectory with all of its quirks, and have even welcomed a new little puppy into our lives, whom we have named in honor of Emily Post. The biggest challenge remains the sale of our house in Pennsylvania, and we ask for your continued prayers in that endeavor. This transition is the beginning for all of us, and a chance to reimagine what it means to be church in this place. Before making any major changes, however, I want to spend the first year getting to know everyone, deliberately listening and learning to the rhythms of this place. While this process will continue until the summer, and I am eager to hear everyone's perspective, I am starting to form a vision of what we could accomplish together, and it roughly falls into 3 priority areas for the future. People come to church to celebrate the most profound moments of their lives. Even on a regular Sunday, we believe that Christ is truly sacramentally present with us in the bread and the wine of the Holy Eucharist and in His holy word. Therefore, it should be a sacred experience. It's not a performance, it's not a show, and it's not about adopting the latest fad. You won't find any gimmicks here. Worship is about giving back to God that which He so freely and perfectly has given us in a way that is of the most excellent quality and authentic to our own faith tradition. Anglicanism is abundantly blessed with a strong tradition of beautiful liturgy and music handed down over many centuries. An article I recently read entitled "Why Millennials Long for Liturgy" by Gracie Olmsted touches on the rediscovery of the great deposit of faith by younger people on whom many had given up as being only spiritual and not religious. In it, one of the interviewees suggests, "If you ask me why kids are going high church," by which he means liturgical church, "I'd say it's because the single greatest threat to our generation and to young people nowadays is the deprivation of meaning in our lives," he says. "In the liturgical space, everything becomes meaningful. In the offering up of the bread and wine, we see the offering up of the wheat and grain and fruits of the earth, and God gives them back in a sanctified form. We are so thirsty for meaning that goes deeper, that can speak to our entire lives, hearts, and wallets, that we're really thirsty to be attached to the earth and to each other and to God. The liturgy is a historical way in which that happens. We are sitting on a gold mine here. We have a magnificent historic space and are heirs of a liturgical and musical tradition that is truly transcendent and transformative, if only we're brave enough to explore it together. I have no illusion of becoming a megachurch, and I do not think that is anything that anyone here is interested in. However, I do believe that with steadfast faith and fidelity to our tradition, we can and will become a beacon to those who seek a place that offers something more than precious moments, theology, pallid liturgy, and unsatisfactory music that is all too common these days. We can be one of those churches that comes to people's minds when they think of sound preaching, robust liturgy, inspiring music, and an authentic living out of God's Great Commission. It is important that we start with the youngest among us. Our preschool, Sunday school, vacation Bible school, and Episcopal Youth Fellowship are critical to formation. In this time of transition, we are also at a crossroads in our Sunday school program. We are very much in need of new leadership for this vital ministry, and I ask you to consider whether God is calling you in this way. Formation of children and youth is key, but it does not stop there. During Advent, we had a brief series on the Scriptures and Handel's Messiah, and I have started educating the congregation at the Saturday evening service about the history and theology of the prayer book in place of a traditional Sunday sermon. I would like to expand that effort to include the whole parish by offering learning opportunities during Lent, followed perhaps in May by a trip to the Metropolitan Museum to see their upcoming exhibits on how vestments and liturgy influence fashion and art to this day. Musically, I would like to see us delve deeper into the traditions of the church by exploring things like Anglican chant, sung propers, and perhaps even a choral mass setting or two for special occasions. I also believe that it is imperative that we foster and develop a children's choir, not only to attract families, but also as a component in forming young disciples. Churches, like people, are often better at taking care of others than they are of taking care of themselves. We engage in a highly impactful program of outreach to the Tuxedo community, our country, and the world. While I feel passionately that our outreach efforts should be continued, I have nonetheless observed a degree of self-neglect here at St. Mary's. We occupy an unusual yet magnificent church, which seems to have grown right out of the living rock upon which it stands. It is filled with treasures from across the centuries and around the world. It is a gift given to God by past generations, and it is our job to maintain it and also to make it shine by highlighting the best elements of the past and making it accessible to present needs. We have done a great job in caring for our outstanding collection of American art glass, but it can't stop there. For example, the lighting and sound systems in the church are in dire need of attention. God created the universe in order and beauty, and his house on earth should reflect that. In order to have a clearer picture and guide in this endeavor, I propose that we have a thorough conditions report compiled by an engineering firm for all of the church buildings, including the rectory, which is sorely in need of repair and updating. Naturally, all of these things will take money. We are blessed to have been given financial gifts by previous generations, which, in conjunction with regular offerings, help us carry out our day-to-day operations. However, refreshing our historic buildings and grounds for God's glory, as well as modern comfort and functionality, will require additional funds. Therefore, I propose embarking on a capital campaign after we assess and prioritize the needs, in order to address them in the best and most financially responsible way. I also intend to invite a representative from the Episcopal Church Foundation to come and speak with us regarding planned giving for the future. One concern I have heard is that under this rector, we had more park people. Under that rector, we had more town people. While certain personalities and charisms may be more attractive to some than to others, I am reminded of the words of St. Paul in his letter to the Galatians, chapter 3, verse 28. There is no longer Jew or Greek, there is no longer slave or free, there is no longer male and female, for all of you are one in Christ Jesus. We must focus on attracting our entire community to God's altar in this place. Indeed, it was placed on this spot for that very reason. I look forward to meeting more people who may have once attended and now do not, as well as those who may have never given us a try. While we must do everything we can to encourage church attendance, we also must be realistic about the fact that Tuxedo is its own special animal. In addition to year-round residents who come to church regularly, we have people who spend much of the year in other locations and at different times of year, such as New York City, Florida, Arizona, Vermont, Colorado, Europe, etc. But they still consider St. Mary's to be their home parish. During our recent visit to Palm Beach, we ran into a parishioner at the Church of Bethesda by the Sea, and she very proudly introduced me to everyone during coffee hour as her rector from Tuxedo Park. There is something about this place that gets under the skin and remains, even if we travel to other locations. So because of the Tuxedo diaspora, our communications are of vital importance. We are in need of a refreshed web presence as well as more engagement on social media. In 2 weeks, the Communications Committee will meet to discuss this in depth. In the short run, we have made the weekly newsletter more mobile-friendly and update our Facebook page regularly with photos, videos, and notices. We are in the process of migrating our office over to Google for Nonprofits, which has numerous benefits, including the fact that it is completely free and will save us hundreds of dollars monthly over current web hosting fees. Unlike in urban settings where there is a church on practically every corner, we are only one of a few houses of worship in our town. Because of our history, physical location, and engagement of our members, we are by far the most engaged in the community, which is something to celebrate. St. Mary's is truly the beating heart of Tuxedo. I am proud that many people who are not themselves Christians consider St. Mary's to be home, even if they do not worship here. They see the value we bring, they see the welcome, they see the good, which transcends all human barriers. Let us work together to open our hearts and doors even wider. Thank you to everyone who has faithfully served in this transition process. Thank you to my dedicated staff and for those who continue to take volunteer leadership roles in this church in many different ways. As brothers and sisters in Christ, let us be kind and care for each other. Let us also be honest and forthright. In this report, I have shared with you my first impressions and vision for this church. However, I want you to know that while I take my role as a leader seriously, I also welcome your input. I invite you to share your hopes and dreams for St. Mary's with me. I'm available to you anytime. Please feel free to call, text, or email. Finally, be joyful. It is good news, after all, that we have to share. Let us work together to recover our faith and traditions, restore our historic buildings and grounds, and re-engage our community. In his sermon at my service of institution, Bishop Clifton Daniel likened the church to a lifeboat. As we navigate this lifeboat in the troubled waters of our world, may Our Lady, the Star of the Sea, be our guiding light to our ultimate destination, her Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.